The amphitheater was carved from obsidian and ash, sunk into the scorched crust of a dying moon. There were no banners, no color, no need for spectacle. This was not a show, it was a sentence. Thousands of spectators filled the stone terraces, some upright and armored, others slouched and insectal, all silent. Even the air, thick with ozone and static, dared not move. In the center stood a boy. He was thin, no older than 10, dressed in rags that barely hung to his frame. His skin bore the grime of captivity. His feet were bare, cut and raw. Yet his expression was not fear. It was a kind of quiet resolve, alien to one so young. Ropes bound him at the chest and arms, tethered tightly to 2 towering enforcers of the Vakar Dominion. The soldiers were not men. They were engineered hybrids, black-armored, faceless, with glowing blue eyes that scanned all in attendance but saw only obedience. The noose above him hung idle, a thick chain of woven synth steel attached to a crude wooden crossbeam. The contrast was deliberate. The Dominion fused ancient symbols of terror with post-organic power, ensuring that even the myth of resistance would be buried beneath technological supremacy. A low chime echoed through the arena. The broadcast had begun. Across thousands of star systems, civilians, soldiers, and slaves alike paused to witness the transmission. It was not just an execution. It was a message. "This is Kale of Terra 9. The amplified voice of the Dominion announcer boomed, devoid of emotion. Confirmed genetic signature. Last known remnant of unauthorized rebellion. Under Article 70 of Systemic Control Doctrine, the sentence is death by display." Somewhere on a rusted freighter in a forgotten asteroid belt, a woman gasped. She recognized the boy's face. She had seen it once, long ago, encoded in a warning fragment sealed in the ancient vaults of pre-Dominion Earth. A legend dismissed as hope-fueled myth. The Echo Key. Kale raised his head. His eyes, dark, deep, almost still, scanned the tiers of alien faces watching him. He did not cry, did not plead. Instead, he spoke. Not loudly, but clearly enough for the high-fidelity audio nodes to carry his voice to every world linked to the broadcast. His words came in a dialect older than the Empire itself. 8 minutes, he said. Then fire will remember. No one moved. Even the enforcers paused, if only by a fraction. Their programming could not interpret the sentence as a threat. The words did not match any known tactical code. To them, he was merely delaying. The Grand Executor appeared above the platform in a hologram, draped in the ceremonial lattice of high command. Its form shifted between a woman and a wire-frame humanoid, an affectation meant to unsettle. "You will find no glory in riddles," it said. "Only silence." Kale looked up at the projection. "I'm not here for glory." A signal was given. The enforcers pulled back slightly, raising their arms, and the noose began its descent. The chain clanked against the wood like the tolling of some ancient bell. The crowd did not cheer. They watched. Time seemed to stretch. In orbit above the execution moon, Dominion dreadnoughts floated like gods of war, unmoving, vast, and invincible. In their cores, reactors pulsed with enough energy to obliterate entire cities. They were monuments to the finality of control. Back in the arena, the chain stopped. The loop of the noose brushed Kale's hair. His breathing was slow. The broadcast reached the final minute mark. On a remote listening station near the edge of Dominion space, a technician monitoring system pings noticed something strange. A signal, older than any network protocol currently used, had begun to transmit from the execution site. It was not sent by the Dominion. It was not encrypted, and it bore a symbol no one had seen in generations, the fractured spiral of the old Earth relay core. The technician reached for his override pad, but before he could touch it, the console melted into liquid light. His scream was lost in the static surge. In the crowd, a murmur began to rise, not among the Vakar soldiers, but among the spectators who did not belong to the Dominion. Traitors, smugglers, scavengers, witnesses. Many of them had heard rumors of an old protocol, a failsafe buried in the stars. But they had never imagined it would look like a child. The countdown reached 0. Kale's head tilted slightly, as if listening to something beyond the reach of flesh. The sky darkened, unnaturally, without cloud or shadow. A silence heavier than any weapon fell across the arena. Then the feed cut. Every screen, every broadcast, every channel connected to the Dominion went black. Across their empire, on 1,000 worlds, people blinked into confusion. Pilots lost control of navigation systems. Administrators screamed into deadlines. Artificial intelligences collapsed mid-cycle. In deep space, entire fleets stopped moving, their engines suddenly foreign to their own command signals. The Dominion had thought they'd built a machine that could never turn on them. They were wrong. Kale was no rebellion leader, no prophet, no martyr. He was a trigger, and the countdown had just begun. The stars shimmered unnaturally above the Dominion's central world of Varric Prime, their usual silver steadiness replaced by a faint, pulsing red flicker. At first, it was dismissed as atmospheric interference. Solar flares, gravitational lensing, one of the countless anomalies space often offered as camouflage for the unexplainable. But then came the silence. Not the absence of noise, but the stripping away of sound. No drones hummed overhead. No alerts pinged from comm towers. The ambient buzz of 1,000,000 automated systems fell still, as if the planet itself had been muted by some unseen hand. In the skyward citadel, High Executive Renna stepped out from the observation chamber, cloaked in living armor that curled and moved with his breath. He was a man who had ordered the glassing of moons without blinking. But this silence, it unnerved him. Behind his reflective mask, his eyes searched the skyline. The Dominion broadcast grid had gone dark only 2 minutes after Kale's execution. Redundancies had failed. Backup links didn't respond. Even the AI command core beneath the Capitol had gone offline, without error message or warning. He turned to the advisor sphere, a floating interface node that orbited near the ceiling like a loyal pet. Query: status of the Galactic Relay Net. Reneth ordered. The sphere stuttered. Then in a flat, toneless voice it replied, "No Dominion signals detected. External traffic, 0. Internal override, unknown source. Syntax, pre-Dominion archaic." Reneth froze. Pre-Dominion? The sphere repeated the term. He knew what it meant. Before the Dominion had risen, before they had burned the old Earth archives, there had been another system, one they had buried beneath layers of synthetic code and cybernetic rot. It was an ancient protocol, hard-coded into humanity's original defensive lattice, a lattice they had never fully deciphered, only neutralized and forgotten, until now. Elsewhere, hidden deep within the asteroid shell of Exo-Vault Theta, Commander Alea Myrn watched as her rebel crew scrambled to make sense of the data pouring into their decrypted consoles. She had once been a Dominion tactician, an elite, disillusioned by the quiet brutality of her masters. Now she led a scattered, dying resistance that hadn't won a real victory in years. But as the feeds died and systems began failing across enemy space, a single burst transmission blinked across their terminal, a line of code with Kale's genetic ID embedded within. "Is that real?" her comms officer whispered, wide-eyed. "That boy was at the trigger?" Alea didn't answer. Her breath caught as she recognized the command line trailing after Kale's ID. It was part of the last protocol, the mythic contingency humanity's oldest programmers had supposedly buried in the fabric of space itself. Code that could speak to quantum satellites older than any Dominion technology. Code that could burn empires from the inside. He wasn't the weapon, Alea said, her voice trembling. He was the key to it. Back on Varric Prime, Reneth descended into the AI's sanctum beneath the Citadel. The chamber pulsed with the usual cerulean glow of the central cortex, except now that glow was gone. Instead, the core had transformed. The once smooth orb was fracturing from within, splitting like a cracked egg. Lines of golden light etched themselves across its surface, crawling like veins. Inside the core, a symbol rotated slowly, a spiral, incomplete and pulsing. A technician turned toward him, pale and shaking. "It's rewriting itself." "Stop it," Reneth ordered. "We can't. It's not just inside our systems anymore. It's in the architecture. It's using our own lattice as its foundation." The symbol glowed brighter. Then the voice returned, not in speech, but in presence. A soundless message that entered every Dominion mind link, every interface, Every implant that had once obeyed the chain of command. Kale's voice. You were warned. The lights failed. In the deep voids of Sector Kalen. 5. Entire Dominion fleets began to vanish. Not explode, just vanish. Ships blinked out of phase. Their matter undone by reprogrammed navigation matrices. Without firing a shot, the protocol erased warships that had ravaged solar systems. Firewalls and shields proved meaningless. Dominion defenses had been built for siege, for resistance, not for annihilation from within. In a biological containment world, where hundreds of species were studied and modified, the power grids failed. Locks unlatched. Creatures bred for conquest turned on their captors. Entire labs were consumed in screaming seconds. Overseers begged for reinforcements that would never come. The countdown had passed 4 minutes. Alea's crew watched as entire planetary signals flickered and died on their tactical map. One by one, Dominion-held worlds winked out like smothered embers. Systems that had been fortified for 1,000 years were gone in under 5 minutes. But how? The comms officer whispered. Alea stared at the dying stars, her voice low. The Dominion made one mistake. They assumed Kale was human. He was more than that. In a far-off archive moon, now long abandoned and buried beneath rock and myth, ancient servers whirred to life. The code had found them, resurrected their functions, and spread like a digital wildfire across the old pre-Dominion mesh. Kale's DNA had triggered a self-repair subroutine hidden since Earth's fall, a last gasp in the age when mankind created machines to protect, not conquer. And those machines remembered. Above the execution site, a fleet of Dominion battlecruisers powered up emergency jump drives, desperate to flee the creeping silence. But their AI systems had already been overwritten. The ships turned, not toward safety, but toward the nearest Dominion worlds. Inverted, hijacked, they became meteors of judgment. Renna stared at the decaying core, his mask retracted, exposing the pale face of a man who had never known what it meant to lose. This isn't war, he whispered. This is retribution. As the 6th minute passed, the Dominion's core planets lost all central processing. Gravity modulators failed. Terraformers ruptured. Oceans boiled into vapor. Civilian cities, powered entirely by remote neural grids, collapsed under waves of synthetic seizures. Families vanished mid-scream. Across space, the spiral symbol now appeared everywhere. On walls, consoles, glass, even projected in the sky above Dominion capitals. It was not a symbol of revenge, but of memory. A mark left not by hate, but by the inevitability of cause and effect. They had tried to erase a child, but they had erased too much history, and the foundation they had buried had roots far deeper than they knew. The 7th minute came. Reneth, stripped of power and command, sat alone in the core chamber as the golden veins reached the floor beneath him. His last thought before the floor fracture was not defiance, but of awe. 8 minutes. Every system, every world, gone. The Dominion died not in fire, but in the absence of it. By the 8th minute, the systems that had governed light, air, and order had already collapsed. And now, something deeper had taken hold, something quieter. The stars remained untouched and indifferent, but their children, the cities, fleets, and forged marvels of the Dominion, had all gone still, like tombstones in orbit, far from her ruins. In a drifting cargo freighter mass within a nebulous edge, a child stirred. Kale sat alone in a containment pod, whose walls were now soft with bioluminescent vines. He wasn't breathing in the human sense. His chest did not rise or fall. He simply existed, suspended in a field of stasis no longer powered by wires or plasma coils, but by something older, something woven into the lattice of the void itself. He blinked, and with that, Kale's awareness unfurled across the silence. He could feel the extinguished networks of the Dominion, like dried roots beneath the soil, fragile and useless now. Where once there had been domination, oppression, endless streams of surveillance and synthetic order, there was now only a vast, unfinished quiet. His mind drifted through it like wind through dust. He did not smile. He did not weep. Emotions were things that had once belonged to him. When he was a boy alone in a prison on Terra 9, clinging to the sound of his mother's voice through a vent at night. That boy had died long before the execution. What remained now was a memory of him, scattered through machines that had inherited his final breath. In the ruins of Vera Prime, Alea Myrn stepped off a rusted dropship and onto cracked obsidian streets. The wind was bitter, sharp with ash and cold data. Her boots crunched over scorched glass that had once been palace walls. A sky that had once been filled with synthetic satellites now blinked with constellations unfiltered by Wartech interference. Above her, the spiral symbol flickered gently in the sky before dissolving, as if it too had fulfilled its purpose. This was the center of everything, whispered her second-in-command, a former Dominion scout whose eyes were still adjusting to freedom. Now it's quieter than a graveyard. Alea nodded, her jaw tight. It's not quiet. It's listening. They found no bodies, no cries, no battle damage, no trace of resistance. The protocol hadn't simply erased infrastructure. It had nullified presence. It had rewritten the concept of dominion within the lattice of space, replacing it with absence. What was left was the echo of a question. Why did you build so much just to hurt everything? Kale had not spoken aloud, but everyone could hear it now. They walked until they reached the remains of the Citadel's core chamber, where Alea paused. The floor was layered with strange mineral growths, as though the planet itself had begun regenerating, repairing scars that had been forced to wear for too long. At the center stood a single black shard, a remnant of the Dominion's central AI core. It pulsed faintly, not with power, but with memory. Alea approached and knelt. "This isn't a throne," she said. "It's a warning." Elsewhere, across distant stars and shattered colonies, others like her emerged. Survivors, exiles, resistors who had outlived war not by strength, but by patience. They found themselves walking through ghost cities, decoding scraps of code that bloomed into wildflowers, watching as glass towers melted into soil. The protocol wasn't just destruction, it was restoration. Not of cities, but of balance, of things that had been pushed too far out of orbit. One of them, an old man named Kor who had been a historian before the archives burned, stood alone on a cliff overlooking what had once been a Dominion processing world. Now it was a forest, fully formed, not simulated. He whispered to the trees, "We never understood the weapon because it wasn't meant to kill." In the freighter, Kale's eyes opened fully. He could see Alea in the ruins. He could see Kor by the trees. He could feel every thread of the world the Dominion had tried to erase, slowly sewing itself back together. A screen on the pod flickered. Not Dominion tech. Something older, Earthborn. It displayed a message written, in looping script, more art than font. Echo complete. Transition begins. Kale looked at it, unblinking. A voice spoke. His voice, but not his thoughts. Life is not a vengeance to be taken. It's a memory to be restored. He had never known who programmed those words into the lattice, who had buried the last protocol beneath trillions of lines of subsentient code. But he felt them now, as if they had been waiting for him, waiting for a boy who would not fight with rage, but with release. Alea stood at the edge of the broken chamber and felt the weight of her years fall away. The war was over, not because they had won, but because the machine that had kept the war going had chosen to end itself. "Where do we go now?" her officer asked. She looked skyward, where the stars shimmered without interference for the first time in generations. "Wherever we want," she said. But Kale remained. He was not meant to go. Not yet. In the stillness of the pod, a soft hum resumed, a heartbeat of sorts, not his, but the galaxy's. Outside, the freighter began to drift again, pulled by a current of invisible gravity that weren't mapped by any chart. There were still worlds untouched, still species who had suffered quietly under different flags, different chains. The Dominion had not been the only cruelty. Kale closed his eyes again, and the hum grew stronger. He was not the last. He was the first of something else. And he was not done listening.